December 1940. The western desert stretches endlessly under a bleached sun, a landscape of dunes and gravel where shadows are scarce and water scarcer still. Near the coastal town of Sidi Barrani in Egypt, the Italian 10th Army has dug in, 80,000 men, entrenched in fortified camps stretching 70 miles along the Mediterranean coast. They expect no serious challenge. British forces in Egypt number barely 30,000, and London is preoccupied with the Battle of Britain and threats of invasion. The Italians feel secure, their supply lines intact, their morale buoyed by Mussolini's promises of empire. But in a dusty command tent outside Mersa Matruh, Lieutenant General Richard O'Connor studies maps with quiet intensity. A slim, soft-spoken Irishman with a reputation for meticulous planning, O'Connor commands the Western Desert Force, a mixed brigade of British, Indian, and Australian troops equipped with outdated tanks and limited supplies. His orders from Cairo are vague: conduct raids, harass the Italians by time. O'Connor has other plans. He traces supply routes with a weathered finger, calculating distances, fuel requirements, ammunition loads. His staff officers lean close, their faces begrimed with desert dust, eyes sharp with anticipation. "We won't raid them," O'Connor says quietly. "We'll destroy them." The statement hangs in the hot air, audacious and impossible. The Italians outnumber the British nearly 3-1. They hold fortified positions with artillery, aircraft, and armor. A direct assault would be suicide, but O'Connor sees weaknesses the Italians do not. Their camps are isolated from each other, communication is poor, leadership complacent. A swift, coordinated strike could shatter their defenses before reinforcements arrive. That night, as stars blaze over the desert, British troops begin their preparations. Tank crews oil Matilda Mark IIs, heavily armored but slow, nearly impervious to Italian anti-tank guns. Indian infantry sharpen bayonets and check ammunition. Australian engineers study maps of minefields and barbed wire obstacles. The air smells of diesel fuel, sweat, and the metallic tang of anticipation. No one speaks of failure. In the darkness, the Western Desert Force moves into position. Silent columns snaking across sand, headlights extinguished, engines muffled. The Italians sleep, unaware that history is about to turn on a single, forgotten battlefield. December 9th, 1940, 0500 hours. The desert is ink black. The horizon, a faint line separating earth from sky. British artillery opens fire without warning, a rolling barrage that tears through Italian positions at WWII camp, 20 miles south of Sidi Barrani. Explosions blossom orange in the darkness, shells screaming overhead, sand and debris fountaining skyward. The Italians, roused from sleep, scramble for weapons, shouting orders that are lost in the chaos. Within minutes, Matilda tanks crash through barbed wire perimeters, their thick armor deflecting Italian anti-tank rounds that bounce harmlessly off steel plating. Machine guns chatter, cutting down defenders who stand frozen in shock. The camp dissolves into panic, soldiers running in all directions, officers trying desperately to organize resistance, artillery crews abandoning guns as tanks crush through emplacements. Major General Pietro Maletti, commander of the Libyan division at WWII, emerges from his tent in pajamas, pistol in hand. He fires at an approaching Matilda, the rounds pinging uselessly off its turret. The tank's gun swivels, fires once. Maletti falls, killed instantly. His death shatters Italian command. By 0800 hours, WWII has fallen. 4,000 prisoners are herded into makeshift cages, dazed and bewildered. British casualties, 56 men. The victory is so swift, so complete, that O'Connor's staff struggles to believe the reports. But there is no time for celebration. The Italians at Sidi Barrani, alerted by distant explosions, are preparing defenses. O'Connor orders an immediate advance. Momentum is everything. Indian infantry storm Tummer East Camp, engaging in brutal close-quarters combat through trenches and bunkers. Bayonets clash, grenades explode in confined spaces, men grapple hand-to-hand in choking dust. The Italians fight bravely, but are overwhelmed by coordinated assault and superior tactics. By nightfall, 3 Italian camps have fallen. 20,000 prisoners crowd British holding areas. The Western Desert Force has suffered fewer than 700 casualties. The impossible is happening. An outnumbered British force is dismantling an Italian army. In Cairo, British commanders receive O'Connor's reports with stunned disbelief. In Rome, Mussolini demands explanations. In the desert, O'Connor plans the next strike. December 16, 1940. Sidi Barrani falls. The Italian 10th Army, shattered and demoralized, retreats westward into Libya, abandoning equipment, supplies, and wounded. O'Connor's forces pursue, relentlessly, harrying the retreating columns with tanks and armored cars. The desert becomes a graveyard of burnt-out trucks, discarded artillery pieces, and abandoned supply dumps. The Italian retreat is not orderly, it is a rout. Soldiers throw down rifles, raise white flags, beg for water. British troops, themselves exhausted and stretched thin, struggle to process the flood of prisoners. Entire battalions surrender without firing a shot, their officers bewildered by the speed and ferocity of the British assault. Within a week, 38,000 Italian prisoners are in British hands. O'Connor's staff calculates captured equipment: 237 artillery pieces, 73 tanks, over 1,000 vehicles. The Western Desert Force has suffered fewer than 2,000 casualties, an exchange rate unprecedented in modern warfare. But victory brings logistical nightmares. British supply lines, stretched across hundreds of miles of desert, struggle to keep pace. Fuel, ammunition, food, and water all must be transported over rutted tracks that turn to dust under relentless sun. Tanks break down, trucks overheat, men suffer from dysentery and dehydration. O'Connor pushes forward anyway. His target, Bardia, a fortified port town just inside the Libyan border, where 45,000 Italian troops have dug in behind concrete bunkers, minefields, and anti-tank ditches. British intelligence warns that Bardia could withstand a siege for months. O'Connor has days, not months. German forces are preparing to intervene in North Africa, and delay means losing the initiative. On January 3, 1941, the assault on Bardia begins. Australian infantry veterans of the Great War storm Italian defenses with brutal efficiency. Engineers clear minefields under fire. Sappers blow gaps in barbed wire. Infantry swarm through breaches, clearing bunkers with grenades and bayonets. The fighting is savage, close quarters, unrelenting. By January 5th, Bardia falls. Another 40,000 prisoners, 400 artillery pieces, 130 tanks captured. The Western Desert Force has now destroyed half the Italian 10th Army in less than a month. And O'Connor is not finished. January 1941. The coastal town of Tobruk rises from the desert like a mirage, a natural deep-water harbor protected by rocky cliffs, the only viable port between Benghazi and Alexandria. For the Italians, Tobruk is a lifeline. For the British, it is the key to controlling North Africa. General Annibale Bergonzoli, known as Electric Whiskers for his flamboyant red beard, commands 25,000 Italian troops entrenched in a 30-mile defensive perimeter around the town. Concrete pillboxes, minefields, anti-tank ditches, and artillery emplacements ring the harbor. Bergonzoli is confident. Tobruk's defenses are among the strongest in North Africa. He expects a lengthy siege, time enough for reinforcements to arrive from Tripoli. O'Connor has other plans. On January 21st, British artillery opens fire at dawn, pounding Italian positions for hours. Australian infantry, supported by Matilda tanks, assault the perimeter from the southwest, exploiting gaps in the minefields. The Italians resist fiercely. Machine gun nests cut down advancing troops, mortars rain shells on tank formations, snipers pick off officers. But the British adapt, using coordinated infantry tank tactics that overwhelm static defenses. Sappers blow holes in concrete bunkers, flamethrowers clear entrenched positions. Tanks roll over trenches, crushing resistance. By nightfall on January 21st, Australian troops have breached the outer defenses. Panic spreads through Italian ranks. Bergonzoli orders a counterattack, but coordination collapses. Units retreat independently, abandoning weapons and positions. On January 22nd, British forces enter Tobruk. Bergonzoli flees westward, leaving behind 25,000 prisoners, 208 artillery pieces, 87 tanks, and vast stockpiles of fuel and ammunition. The harbor, intact and operational, becomes a critical supply base for future operations. In London, Prime Minister Winston Churchill telegraphs congratulations. Your victory at Tobruk has electrified the nation. But in the desert, O'Connor's eyes are already fixed on the next objective, Benghazi, 400 miles to the west. The Italian 10th Army is disintegrating, but it is not yet destroyed. And O'Connor knows that a wounded enemy, given time to regroup, can become dangerous again. February 1941. The Italian 10th Army retreats in chaos along the coastal road toward Benghazi, a sprawling city that offers the last refuge before Tripoli. General Bergonzoli, his forces battered and demoralized, hopes to regroup in Benghazi's defenses, buying time for German reinforcements promised by Hitler. O'Connor sees an opportunity for a knockout blow. If he can cut the coastal road south of Benghazi, he can trap the entire Italian army. But the logistics are daunting. The distance from Tobruk to Beta Fam, a small village astride the coastal road, is 150 miles across trackless desert. His tanks are worn, fuel is scarce, and men are exhausted from weeks of continuous combat. O'Connor gambles everything. On February 4th, he dispatches the 7th Armored Division, nicknamed the Desert Rats, on a bold flanking maneuver across the interior desert. The column moves at breakneck speed, navigating by compass and sun, refueling from captured Italian dumps, racing against time and terrain. Tank crews drive for 30 hours straight, sand clogging engines, tracks breaking, exhaustion blurring vision. On February 5th, lead elements of the 7th Armored reach Beta Fam, blocking the coastal road, just as the first Italian convoys appear on the horizon. The Italians, stunned to find British tanks blocking their retreat, launch desperate attacks. For 2 days, the battle rages. Italian armor charges British positions, only to be destroyed by concealed anti-tank guns. Wave after wave of Italian tanks and trucks crash against British defenses, each assault ending in burning wrecks and mounting casualties. The British, outnumbered but holding superior positions, repel every attack. On February 7th, the Italian 10th Army surrenders en masse. Bergonzoli, captured in his staff car, is brought before O'Connor. The Italian general, his famous red beard matted with dust, shakes his head in disbelief. "How did you get here so fast?" he asks. O'Connor smiles faintly. "We didn't stop." The final tally is staggering. 130,000 Italian prisoners captured in 2 months, over 1,300 artillery pieces, 400 tanks, and countless vehicles. British casualties, fewer than 2,000 killed and wounded. Operation Compass has achieved what no one thought possible. A numerically inferior force has destroyed an entire army through speed, audacity, and superior tactics. February 12, 1941. O'Connor stands on the outskirts of Benghazi, watching Australian troops march through the city's dusty streets. The Italian 10th Army is destroyed. Libya's eastern half is in British hands. The road to Tripoli, Italy's last stronghold in North Africa, lies open. O'Connor's forces are exhausted but triumphant. With one final push, he could expel Italy from North Africa entirely, securing the Mediterranean and denying Axis powers a foothold on the continent. His staff urges immediate advance. Intelligence reports indicate Tripoli is lightly defended. The Italians are demoralized, their supply lines collapsing. Victory is within grasp. But in Cairo, British Middle East Command issues new orders: halt the advance. Churchill and the War Cabinet have decided to redirect forces to Greece, where German invasion threatens. The decision is political, not strategic. Britain must honor commitments to its Greek allies, even at the cost of North African success. O'Connor protests vehemently. "Give me 2 more weeks," He pleads in telegrams to Cairo, "I can finish this." His requests are denied. The 7th Armored Division, the spearhead of Operation Compass, is withdrawn and sent to Greece. Australian infantry are pulled back to defensive positions. The Western Desert Force, stretched thin and undersupplied, is ordered to hold the line at Benghazi. The strategic opportunity vanishes. In Germany, Hitler orders the Afrika Korps to Libya under command of General Erwin Rommel. Within weeks, German panzers and mechanized infantry arrive in Tripoli, transforming the North African campaign. Rommel, aggressive and unpredictable, launches counteroffensives that push British forces back to the Egyptian border. The gains of Operation Compass are erased within months. O'Connor, captured during a reconnaissance mission in April 1941, spends the rest of the war in Italian POW camps, his warnings vindicated too late. Operation Compass, one of the most brilliant military campaigns in British history, becomes a forgotten victory, overshadowed by subsequent defeats, its lessons unlearned, its architects sidelined. In the cold arithmetic of war, triumph without follow-through is merely postponed defeat. February 1941. While generals plot strategy in Cairo and London, the soldiers of the Western Desert Force face the grinding reality of desert warfare. Private Jack Thompson, a 22-year-old from Yorkshire serving with the Royal Tank Regiment, sits beside his Matilda Mark II, scraping sand from the engine intake. The tank, nicknamed Bertha, has traveled over 1,000 miles in 2 months, crossing terrain that would destroy civilian vehicles in days. Thompson's hands are cracked and bleeding from handling hot metal and abrasive sand. His uniform, once khaki, is now bleached gray by sun and dust. He has not bathed in 3 weeks, eaten a hot meal in 10 days, or slept more than 4 hours at a stretch since the campaign began. Yet morale remains high. The victories at Bardia, Tobruk, and Beta Fahm have proven that the British can fight and win against numerically superior enemies. The camaraderie forged in shared hardship binds the men together: British tankmen, Australian infantry, Indian sappers, New Zealand gunners. They share water rations, trade cigarettes for bully beef, joke about the Italians' fondness for spaghetti found in captured supply dumps. But the desert is as much an enemy as the Italians. Temperatures soar to 120 degrees Fahrenheit by day, plummet to near freezing at night. Sandstorms strike without warning, blinding men and clogging machinery. Scorpions and vipers lurk in every shadow. Dysentery and dehydration claim more casualties than enemy fire. Thompson writes letters home that will never mention the fear, the terror of being trapped in a burning tank, the helplessness of watching friends die from infection because medical supplies are scarce, the loneliness of endless sand stretching in every direction. Instead, he writes of victories, of captured Italian officers who surrendered with bottles of wine, of the strange beauty of desert sunsets that paint the dunes in shades of gold and crimson. On February 15th, Thompson's unit receives orders to withdraw to defensive positions. The advance is over. The news hits like a physical blow. After all they have endured, all they have accomplished, the campaign ends not in triumph, but in stalemate. Thompson does not understand the politics, the strategic calculations, the commitments to Greece. He knows only that the war in the desert is far from over. March 1941. The port of Tripoli bustles with activity as German transports unload tanks, trucks, artillery, and supplies. General Erwin Rommel, newly appointed commander of the Afrika Korps, strides down the gangplank with characteristic energy. At 49, Rommel is already a legend in the Wehrmacht, a decorated veteran of the Great War, a hero of the French campaign where his Panzer Division achieved breakthroughs thought impossible. Now, tasked with shoring up Italy's collapsing North African position, Rommel arrives with 25,000 German troops, 150 tanks, and strict orders from Berlin: defend Tripoli, do not advance. Rommel ignores the orders within days. After touring the front lines and interrogating Italian commanders, he concludes that the British forces opposite him are weak, overstretched, and vulnerable. The units that destroyed the Italian 10th Army have been withdrawn. Replacements are inexperienced and poorly supplied. Rommel sees opportunity. On March 24th, without authorization from Berlin or Rome, Rommel launches a reconnaissance in force toward El Agheila. The British, expecting defensive posture, are caught off guard. German panzers, faster and better armed than British tanks, punch through thinly held positions. Within days, Rommel escalates the reconnaissance into a full offensive. British forces, unprepared for aggressive German tactics, retreat in confusion. Towns captured at great cost during Operation Compass, Benghazi, Derna, Tobruk's outskirts, fall back into Axis hands. By mid-April, Rommel has reversed 2 months of British gains in 2 weeks. Only Tobruk, now besieged by German and Italian forces, holds out, defended by the same Australian troops who captured it in January. The desert, war enters a new phase, no longer a one-sided British victory, but a brutal back-and-forth struggle that will last 3 more years. Rommel's arrival transforms the North African campaign from footnote to epic, his tactical brilliance earning respect even from his enemies. But the foundation of his success is built on the missed opportunity of Operation Compass, the decision to halt O'Connor's advance, to withdraw veteran units, to leave the door open for German intervention. London, 1942. In the halls of the War Office, generals pore over after-action reports from Operation Compass, seeking to understand how a vastly outnumbered force achieved such stunning success. The lessons are clear: mobility, combined arms coordination, aggressive leadership, exploitation of enemy weaknesses, speed, and audacity trump numerical superiority. Yet these lessons are not applied. The British Army in North Africa, rebuilt after Rommel's counteroffensive, reverts to cautious, methodical tactics. Commanders prioritize supply lines over speed, consolidation over exploitation. Opportunities to destroy Rommel's forces, at Gazala, at Alam Halfa, are missed due to hesitation and rigid planning. It is not until November 1942, nearly 2 years after Operation Compass, that Montgomery's 8th Army finally defeats Rommel at El Alamein, employing the same principles O'Connor used: overwhelming firepower, coordinated assault, relentless pursuit. But by then, the cost has been immense. Tens of thousands of British casualties, years of stalemate, resources diverted from other theaters. O'Connor, released from POW camp in 1943, returns to England embittered. He is lionized briefly, then sidelined. Too old, too outspoken, a reminder of opportunities squandered. He watches younger officers receive credit for victories achieved with tactics he pioneered. In private correspondence, he writes, "We had them beaten. All we needed was 2 more weeks." The forgotten victory of Operation Compass becomes a case study in military academies, an example of brilliant tactics undermined by strategic myopia, of battlefield success negated by political decisions, of lessons learned too late to matter. The soldiers who fought in the campaign, Thompson and his tank crew, the Australian infantry, the Indian sappers, fade into obscurity, their achievements overshadowed by later, more famous battles. But in the silence of the desert, where sand covers the wrecks of Italian tanks and British supply dumps, the ghosts of that forgotten victory remain, a testament to what might have been if courage and audacity had been matched by strategic vision. 1943 to 1945. The 7th Armored Division, the legendary Desert Rats who spearheaded Operation Compass, continue fighting across North Africa, Sicily, Italy, and eventually into northwestern Europe. They carry with them the hard-won lessons of the desert: mobility, initiative, aggressive reconnaissance. At El Alamein in October 1942, the Desert Rats break through Axis lines, pursuing Rommel's forces across Libya and into Tunisia. At Tunis in May 1943, they participate in the final destruction of Axis forces in North Africa, completing the mission O'Connor began 2.5 years earlier. Over 250,000 German and Italian prisoners are captured, more than twice the haul of Operation Compass. Montgomery receives the credit. O'Connor's name is rarely mentioned. The division lands at Normandy in June 1944, fighting through Normandy's hedgerows and across the Rhine into Germany. Veterans of the Desert Campaign train new recruits, passing down tactics learned in battles long forgotten by the British public. Private Jack Thompson, now a sergeant, leads a tank platoon through the Ardennes, across the Rhine, into the heart of the Third Reich. He survives the war, returns to Yorkshire, and rarely speaks of his service. When asked about the war, he mentions Normandy, the Rhine crossing, never Operation Compass, never the desert. The victories are too distant, too overshadowed by later campaigns. The Desert Rat's divisional insignia, a jerboa, a desert rodent known for speed and elusiveness, becomes one of the most recognizable symbols of the British Army. But the context of its origin, the forgotten campaign where that reputation was forged, fades into obscurity. In regimental museums, artifacts from Operation Compass gather dust, maps, captured Italian flags, photographs of Matilda tanks at Beta-Fam. Visitors pass by, drawn instead to exhibits on D-Day and the Battle of Britain. The legacy of Operation Compass survives not in public memory, but in the ethos of the units that fought it, an emphasis on speed, daring, and the refusal to accept conventional wisdom about what is possible. Post-war Britain, 1945 to 1960. As historians begin writing the official histories of World War II, Operation Compass occupies a curious position. Acknowledged as a tactical success, but dismissed as strategically irrelevant. The reasons for this neglect are complex and revealing. First, the victory was reversed within months. Rommel's counteroffensive erased British gains, making Operation Compass appear a temporary success rather than a decisive turning point. Historians focus on campaigns with lasting impact, El Alamein, D-Day, Stalingrad, not brilliant operations undone by subsequent defeats. Second, the campaign lacks the drama and sacrifice that dominate popular narratives. No beaches stormed under heavy fire, no cities reduced to rubble, no last stands against overwhelming odds. Operation Compass was too one-sided, too efficient, too bloodless by World War II standards. Victories achieved with minimal casualties make poor stories. Third, the decision to halt O'Connor's advance remains politically sensitive. Churchill's choice to prioritize Greece over North Africa, based on political commitments rather than military logic, resulted in disaster. British forces were expelled from Greece within weeks, and the North African War dragged on for 2 more years. Acknowledging Operation Compass as a missed opportunity means acknowledging strategic failure at the highest levels. So the campaign is relegated to footnotes, mentioned briefly in comprehensive histories, but rarely examined in depth. O'Connor, denied the recognition he deserves, dies in 1981 with his achievements largely forgotten outside military circles. The soldiers who fought Thompson, the Australian infantry, the Indian sappers, returned to civilian life carrying memories that no one asked them to share. But in military academies, Operation Compass is studied intensely. Officers analyze O'Connor's use of mobile warfare, his integration of armor and infantry, his exploitation of intelligence and surprise. The campaign becomes a template for modern maneuver warfare, influencing doctrine from the Israeli Defense Forces to the U.S. Marine Corps. The public forgets, the professionals remember. Operation Compass exists in a paradox, historically obscure, but doctrinally influential, a forgotten victory that shaped how modern armies fight. Present day, the western desert of Egypt and Libya looks much as it did in 1940, endless expanses of sand and gravel, dotted with scrub vegetation, baked under relentless sun. But scattered across this empty landscape are the relics of Operation Compass, rusted hulks of Italian tanks half buried in dunes, concrete pillboxes slowly crumbling, minefields marked with fading warning signs. At Beta-Fam, a small memorial stands beside the coastal road, a simple stone marker listing the units that fought there in February 1941. Few travelers stop. The site is remote, the history obscure. But occasionally a military historian or a descendant of a veteran makes the pilgrimage, standing in silence where 130,000 Italian soldiers surrendered and an army was destroyed. In Britain, the Imperial War Museum holds artifacts from a campaign, O'Connor's maps, a captured Italian flag from Bardia, photographs of Matilda tanks at Tobruk. A new generation of historians, freed from wartime political sensitivities, examines the campaign with fresh eyes. Books are published, documentaries produced. Operation Compass begins its slow resurrection from historical obscurity. Sarah O'Connor, great niece of General Richard O'Connor, visits the Regimental Museum of the 7th Armored Division. She reads her great-uncle's war diary, preserved in climate-controlled archives, pages filled with meticulous planning, tactical calculations, and the quiet frustration of a commander whose greatest victory was never completed. One entry, dated February 13th, 1941, reads, "We stood at the gates of Tripoli. With 2 more weeks, we could have ended the war in North Africa. Instead, we must watch everything we achieved unravel. History will judge whether the decision was correct. I doubt it will remember it all." Sarah traces her fingers across the faded ink, feeling the weight of forgotten sacrifice. She thinks of the soldiers who fought in the desert, the tank crews, the infantry, the engineers, who won a brilliant victory only to see it wasted. Their courage deserves more than footnotes and fading memorials. As the sun sets over the museum, casting long shadows across displays of desert warfare, Sarah makes a quiet promise to tell the story, to ensure that Operation Compass is remembered not as a forgotten victory, but as a testament to what audacity and leadership can achieve and what timidity and politics can squander. The desert remembers. Now, so must we. If this story inspired you, subscribe to our channel for more forgotten battles of World War II. Like this video and comment which aspect of Operation Compass surprised you most. Coming next, the village that hid 5,000 Jews, the extraordinary story of Lou Chambon-Serlignan. Don't miss our upcoming documentaries on untold acts of courage and resistance. Subscribe now and discover the history textbooks left behind.